If you walked out of the 2026 economy paper feeling frustrated or thinking the paper was random or unfair, you are not underprepared. You are simply using an outdated operating system. This was not merely an economy paper, this was a systems architecture paper. And that realization changes everything for 2027 exam. Traditional coaching still teaches economy like it in 2015, like memorize GDP, memorize repo rates, memorize bullet points, etc. etc. But the 2026 paper shattered that entire model. Why? Because UPSC has pivoted towards systems architecture, institutional backends, legal liabilities, protocol designs, and the students who understood systems only survived. The students who only memorized the compilations collapsed. Because today we are not doing an answer key discussion here, we are conducting a structural autopsy of economy 2026 GS paper 1. Because these four questions reveal the exact philosophical shift happening inside the UPSC we are going to discuss as case studies. And if you fail to understand the shift, your 2027 preparation may already be obsolete. What is the new UPSC model is system architecture, institutional backends, legal liabilities, and protocol design. Let's deconstruct the system. Interestingly, nearly 1 month before the examination, Metis had already discussed the economy paper through five structural systems. Those are fiscal federalism, digital money and CBDC, fund markets and interest rates, fiscal deficit dynamics, and financial stability and systemic risk. And multiple questions in the 2026 paper emerged directly from these institutional frameworks, which discussed in this 40 minutes video before 1 month of the examination. So in 2026 questions we have to discuss like these case studies for simple understanding of our students. So we are starting with case study 1, that is sovereign trap, that is UPI versus digital rupee. This is the question given in the UPSC 2026 regarding UPI versus digital rupee. Look carefully at what UPSC did here in the examination. Most aspirants saw UPI and a digital rupee on a smartphone screen and assumed both the systems were fundamentally identical. That was a trap. That's not correct. Why? Because UPSC was not testing whether you use the app or not. It was testing whether you understand the backend institutional liability structure. Let me simplify that. When you use UPI, you are transferring commercial bank money. Commercial bank money. The liability remains with the commercial banking system. But the digital rupee is tokenized sovereign legal tender. It is a direct liability of the RBI. That is the difference. UPI is commercial banking system connected with, but digital rupee is connected with the liability of the RBI. That is the major difference here. You have to understand here. The questions are like this given in UPSC 2026. UPSC is asking like this: who ultimately holds the risk when the digital lights go out? That is the question of a policy maker, not a student. A passenger sees an app, an administrator sees liabilities and settlements risk. That is the difference. Is the entire paper. UPSC want not student, they want administrator from you. This is the shift you have to understand in the form of given questions in the UPSC GS prelims paper 1. We are moving to the case study number 2, that is platform versus protocol. What is the platform versus protocol? The ONDC shift given in the examination. Most students prepared ONDC as a standard current affairs acronym. But UPSC was interested in the philosophy of digital market restructuring. Traditional platforms like Amazon operates as closed ecosystems. Platform centric capitalism, that is called as. But ONDC destroys this. It converts commerce from a platform model to protocol model. That is the question asked in the UPSC prelims 2026 in the form of protocol and platform system regarding ONDC. This is ONDC, this is state driven digital infrastructure design. Again, this is the systems thinking, not rote learning. And move to the third case study, that is high finance demystified, that is RWA tokenization. RWA tokenization. This is GS prelims paper 1 set A 91 question terrified many aspirants. This is regarding RWA tokenization. Regarding real world asset. But UPSC was testing if you can cut through the Web3 jargon and identify economic utility. Real world asset tokenization converts physical assets into digital tokens. So think structurally. Once ownership becomes fractionalized, liquidity increases and market access expands. The statement were the statements were correct because of basic financial logic, not blockchain hype. Technology is no longer separate from economy. Technology is the financial infrastructure and comes to the core economic anchor, that is case study number 4, that is the crowding out effect. which were asked in the examination, crowding out effect. UPSC did not completely abandon traditional macroeconomics, but it demanded something much more dangerous: precise conceptual application under pressure. Look at carefully at the crowding out question in the UPSC paper, General Studies Prelims 2026, when the state aggressively borrows capital from domestic markets to fund expanding physical deficits. If enters the credit system as a massive non-price sensitive competitor for capital. And once sovereign borrowing pressure intensifies, domestic interest rates begin rising. Now think structurally: if borrowing costs surge, private industries trying to build factories, expand production, or raise investment capital begin retreating from the market. Private sector expansion gets crowded out. Notice what UPSC is doing here. Even a traditional macroeconomics question was not testing memorized definitions. Please identify this. It was testing what? Market interaction, capital pressure, institutional behavior, and systemic economic consequences. That is the shift here. So that is why you have to be very careful with economic survey and union budget of the particular year of the examination conducted. So you have to be very careful of the government reports. So questions will directly taken from there in UPSC for UPSC. Comes to the next case study, that is final case study, that is colonial backend. The Hilton-Young exchange trap. This question asked in the 2026 GS prelims paper 1. This was the most beautiful question in the paper. In this question, UPSC used colonial history to test modern currency mechanisms. That's why I am saying this was the most beautiful question in the paper. The British maintained an overvalued rupee sterling ratio not to stabilize the trade but to protect the British financial extraction. So the same financial extraction mechanics Britain used in 1926 are the same settlement risk mechanics the RBI manages in 2026 with a different technology but same institutional architecture. This is why history is not just dates. It is the blueprint for the current economy. That is why I am saying this is the most beautiful question of this paper. So with the different technology but same institutional architecture, the same financial extraction mechanics, same settlement risk mechanics, the RBI manages in 2026. That is why history is the blueprint for the current economy. The biggest mistake can make is behaving like a passive consumer of information. From the real message of the 2026 paper, I'm saying like this: because reading PDFs, memorizing checklists is not going to help you in the examination. UPSC, you have to understand the direction of the UPSC. UPSC is no longer rewards the passengers, it rewards administrators. The direction of UPSC has changed dramatically to fintech technology, to fintech, and within the macroeconomics also the questions asking is changing dramatically. And further moving forward, administrator thinking is necessarily according to this paper, because administrator rewards UPSC rewards administrators ask three things here according to the economy paper. One, who owns the liability? Two, who controls the settlement? And three, what institutional friction is this actually going to solve or solving? Let me repeat it again. Administrative thinking is like this, not passive consumer thinking. When administrator is thinking like this, who owns the liability, who controls the settlement, and what institutional friction is this solving? That type of thinking is administrator having. So that type of thinking you have to imbibe and you have to improve with yourselves from changing the dynamics of the UPSC question papers. If you are done with being a passenger and you are ready to start thinking like an administrator, subscribe to Metis IAS. We don't teach you what to memorize, we teach you how to see the architecture behind the questions, because the era of rote economy preparation is dying, it's gone. System literacy has begun. Next, we are taking this exact systems lens into the single biggest psychological battlefield of the cycle, that is the CSAT risk decoupling masterclass. I will see you there.